In a 1991 Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, everybody know Calvin and Hobbes?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Calvin asks his dad, who is seated and reading a newspaper. We all see this setup where Calvin comes to ask Dad a question that's going to rock Dad's world, and this is no different. He says, "Dad, how do soldiers killing each other solve the world's problems?" And the next two frames show the growing bewilderment on his father's face as he just sits there and silently ponders this amazing question. And in the last frame, Calvin is walking away saying, "I think grown-ups just act like they know what they're doing." Which is, of course, true. None of us really know exactly what we're doing. We just go along with what this world says is true and what it says is right until somebody points out, somebody very kindly like Calvin points out how insane our beliefs are. How do soldiers killing each other solve the world's problem? So far it hasn't. They may create the absence of violence and conflict after a while, but soldiers killing each other has never solved anything. And it's never brought true peace anywhere in the world. Peace is not simply the absence of conflict. Peace is the ability to remain peaceful even in the midst of conflict. The peace that passes all understanding is never rattled. It is never angry. It never seeks to get even. It never seeks to win or actually solve anything. It simply seeks the truth of all of us who are caught up in the ego's counterfeit peace, and it beckons us to come out beyond all of this suffering and strife and rest in that field of unity where war isn't even a reality. It can't even exist. Ultimately, though, most of us were like Calvin's dad. We just sit there and be confused and perplexed when the inanity of the ego world is just pointed out to us. So this morning, let us instead be like Calvin and question the craziness of this world so we can become the true peacemakers who can help the whole world awaken from this crazy dream and say,
Oh,
yeah. Please rise. Charmaine May is a native of the Philippines, and she says, "All my life, I've lived in conflict, hearing gunfire at night. Fearing for my friends' and family's safety was almost normal to me." Think about that. All your life, living in conflict, hearing gunfire at night. Almost normal to just lie awake and wonder if everybody's okay. To our peace-privileged Western ears, that sentence seems blissfully foreign. We are not living in a war-torn area. We are not usually fearful of gunfire, bombs, or other violence visiting our doorstep, let alone the doorsteps of friends and family. We find it hard to imagine May's situation and how she can survive in such a place. But I can tell you how May survives. She is part of a United Nations program that is dedicated to peace building. The program focuses on helping those whose neighborhoods and countries are embroiled in conflict. It helps them to understand the deeper roots of war and how it affects everyone's mental health. May says thinking about mental health and talking about it is often taboo. She said, "I had to make sure I worked through my own trauma so I could help others with similar experiences." And jubilants, that is the key to peace. Working through your own trauma so you can be a source of healing for others. Theologian Henri Nouwen calls that being a wounded healer. The great illusion of leadership, Nouwen wrote in his classic book, The Wounded Healer, is to think that someone can be led out of the desert by someone who has never been there. And that's good news for us and for all of the world, jubilants, because there is not one person in this room, not one person watching, not one person in the world who has not been wounded in some way. Why is this news of our wounding good? Well, if we become willing to heal our own wounds and our traumas, then we too can become peace builders in this world, just like Charmaine May. We each have a gift to offer to one another, but often we think we can't do anything. We think we are powerless to end the strife and the suffering and ongoing wars in this world, but I am here to tell you the truth. We are the only ones who can end the strife and the suffering and the wars going on in this world. Why? Because it is our collective consciousness and the power of this collective consciousness that started the wars in the first place. And if that is true, if we unconsciously begin the wars around us, we have the conscious power to end them. Oh, so how do you do that, preacher? I'm interested. What do? We pursue our own total peace of mind. And that is not spiritual bypass I'm talking about. You can only pursue your own total peace of mind when you are willing to feel the pain of your own wounds and traumas and recognize the harmful patterns that they have created in our own lives, and then be willing to do the hard and often painful work of healing your own inner traumas and wounds and releasing them. And that's why I often say this work that I talk about, the work that I do within myself, is not navel-gazing. We are not talking about stuffing your feelings, but we're talking about doing your own inner work of recognizing and healing those harmful patterns within yourself, because it is the only way to bring peace not just to yourself, but to extend it out into the world. And May understands that to be a peace builder means to be willing to heal our own traumas, but it also means seeking, she says, to understand what's going on inside the minds of survivors, the military, and even rebel fighters. She says, we might not always see eye to eye, but resolving the conflicts within all of us can help resolve the conflicts around us. Resolving the conflicts within all of us, survivors, military, rebel fighters, the people who command them. That helps to resolve the conflicts around us. Hear me clearly this morning, jubilants, especially if it is peace that you seek. Resolving the conflicts within us is the only way to resolve the conflicts outside of us. Refusing to see and bring forth the healing and warring nature of our own hearts is to limit the peace that we see around us. If we limit the peace within, then we limit what kind of peace can happen outside of us. Your peace, A Course in Miracles reminds us this morning, lies in its limitlessness. Limit the peace you share, whether it's with yourself or with others, and yourself, your capital S, higher divine self, must be unknown to you. Every altar to God is part of you because the light God created is one with you. Would you cut off a holy sibling from the light that is yours? You would not do so if you realized that you can darken only your own mind. As you bring your sibling back, so will you return. That is the law of God. That is the law of God, A Course says, for the protection of the wholeness of God's child. Oh, but how we argue. How we argue endlessly for our limitations. Who am I, you say? Who am I to bring peace to the world? I'm just one person. I can't do anything. Really? I mean, that's the limit you're going to argue for? As the Course reminds us this morning, only you can deprive yourself of anything. Thinking that you have no power to change the world, you see, is the goal of the ego's game. As long as we believe that we are powerless, then the ego is in the driver's seat, taking us everywhere we unconsciously want to go. And as long as we believe that, then we're in that ego's loop of seek but do not find. It likes to pit us against one another. It likes to point out the differences that we believe we have along the lines of politics and religion or gender or class or worldview, any other thing we do to separate ourselves. That's the essence of separation, just keeping us focused on how we're different from each other. But what about what we all share in common, jubilants? We have a lot in common with those we prefer to not engage with in the world. We all suffer. We all love. We're all wounded. We all seek healing. We feel isolated, all of us, but all of us are out there seeking community. We feel unloved. We all want to feel loved. We all feel bound by something. And all we ever want, any of us, anywhere in the world, is freedom. Our commonalities are far more numerous than our perceived differences. And yet, we argue endlessly for our limitations. We prefer to see our suffering as somehow more important or deeper than those that we would rather dismiss as crazy or stupid or evil. Henri Nouwen tells the story of a young fugitive who sought refuge in a small village. Soldiers came looking for the boy, and they threatened to burn down the village if the villagers didn't turn the boy over. And so the community, they didn't know what to do, so they went to the local minister, and after consulting the Bible, the minister says, "It's better that one man die that the whole people be lost." And so they turned the boy over to the soldiers, and the community celebrated. The minister, though, he was sullen, and he didn't go to the celebration, and an angel came to him in the night and said, "What have you done?" And the minister said, "I gave the boy to the enemy." And the angel said, "Do you know that you have handed over the Messiah?" And the minister anxiously replied, "How could I have known?" Well, the angel replied, "If, instead of reading the Bible, you had taken the time to visit the boy and look into his eyes, you would have known." How often, jubilants, do we look into the eyes of the fugitives around us? Those we would rather hand over to the cruelty of the ego world instead of recognizing their commonality with us. How many times have we handed over the Messiah, the potential relationships with others that could have saved and healed us, instead of looking them in the eye and seeing our own salvation and the salvation of the world? Breathe deeply. Death row prisoner and author Jarvis Masters tells a story in his book Finding Freedom about his habit that he had every night of just turning his television on and turning the sound down because he would use the light of the television to read. But occasionally he would just yell out to the other inmates and ask them what was happening on the TV. The first time the inmate yells back, "It's the Ku Klux Klan, Jarvis," and they're yelling and complaining about how it's the blacks and the Jews who are responsible for all the problems. About half an hour later he yells, "Hey, what's happening now?" Another voice calls back, "Oh, that's the Greenpeace folks. They're demonstrating about the fact that the rivers are being polluted and the trees are being cut down and the animals are being hurt and our earth is being destroyed." Sometime later he asks again, "Hey, what's going on?" Someone says, "Oh, Jarvis, that's the U.S. Senate. And that guy who's up there now talking, he's blaming the other guys, the other side, the other political party for all the financial difficulty this country's in." And Jarvis starts laughing and he calls down, "I've learned something here tonight. Sometimes they're wearing Klan outfits. Sometimes they're wearing Greenpeace outfits. Sometimes they're wearing suits and ties. But they all have the same angry faces." The commonality, as Buddhist nun Pema Chodron reminds us, is that every single one of those people, they're suffering. And perhaps the ones suffering the most, no matter the side of the political divide they're on, they're the ones who refuse to be open, to let alone soften their hearts to those that they oppose. Chodron says the line of a poem that she read gives us a great definition for peace: softening what is rigid in our hearts. Our hearts are so rigid, she says, over the smallest things. A mosquito buzzes in our ear. Somebody cuts us off in traffic. And what happens, she says, in those moments, war breaks out. War, she says, could be smashing that little teensy-weensy mosquito. But I'm also talking, she says, about the war within the family, war at the office, war on the streets, and also war between nations, war in the world. That's because, she says, war lives inside of us. And it will express itself whenever it gets the chance. We may rage at somebody else's fundamentalism or rigidity, But we only do that because we have that same fundamentalism and rigidity. Whether you're in a Klan outfit or in a Greenpeace outfit or a suit in the U.S. Senate, fundamentalism and rigidity. That's another commonality. The step to healing the war within, though, and bringing peace to the world around us is to recognize our own penchant for war and vow to heal it any way we can. We must stop, as Chodron said, perfecting our habits of hard-heartedness. And that's what we walk around doing. When we're living in the ego, we are perfecting our habits of hard-heartedness. She reminds us, though, to start from that place of compassion for ourselves. And sometimes that's the hardest. That's the hardest place to start. But as Zen Masters Suzuki Roshi once said to his students, all of you are perfect just as you are, and you could use a little improvement. At our depths, jubilants, we're all perfect just as we are. But that ego, that part of us that wants to arrange the world just so it pleases us, it keeps getting in the way. We could all use a little improvement. Taking a vow to live peacefully, rooting ourselves in that peace and rooting out the sources of war within ourselves. It's the way we discover that peace that passes understanding that Jesus said he would leave with us. The Greek word for peace used here is eirene. There you go. Here's your Greek. Eirene. Eirene. Doesn't that sound nice? A little bit of eirene in your heart. It connotes tranquility, harmony, safety, and security, but not just for ourselves, but among all people. And so the key to creating this peace within, so that it can manifest out in the world around us, is that vow to keep an open heart, to soften the rigid places. And the only way to keep an open heart is to realize, as the Course says, where your safety truly lies. And that is in your defenselessness. Because whenever we defend our views and our ideas about the world, we go to war. Whenever we yell at the TV, which is what I do, that's why I don't watch news programs anymore. It's like, but that's what you do! Ah! So I don't do that anymore because that makes me go to war. So I stop defending my own views. Stop defending your own ideas. Stop bringing more suffering into the world. When we can hold our views lightly, though, and realize that we become no better than what we oppose when we close our hearts, that's the moment when we can become effective peace builders. We become like Charmaine May and all the other wounded healers, bringing peace into their own hearts first and then out into the world. Jarvis Masters understands this concept. An inmate once asked him how he dealt so calmly with the guards that abused him, and he said, if I retaliate, then they go home and beat their own kids, and I don't want that to happen. If we want peace in the world, jubilants, we start by vowing to never use our minds or our hearts as weapons. We vow to find another way, a nonviolent, loving, and creative way to bring peace to ourselves and end the suffering within, which ends the suffering around us. Only you can deprive yourself of anything, a Course reminds us. And if we are feeling deprived of peace in any moment, check yourself. You're at war with something. You're defending something. You're pushing away your holy siblings. So I invite you this morning, jubilants, stop limiting yourself. Your peace is limitless, but only when it is shared with those around us. Remember, those we close our hearts to, they could be the Messiah that the Holy has sent to help us heal our own suffering and help us save the world from its suffering. So I invite you this morning, jubilants, become the peace that you seek by disarming the armies that are marching in your own head all the time. Lay down your weapons. Surrender to peace. Because the moment you do, you become a mighty force for peace in the world. Oh yeah.